So talk about living in crazy times, right? We have a 20mm f2.8 lens that cost $158 and it has autofocus, which is incredible. So anyways, I'm using the DJI RS3 mini gimbal here, and with the A7C II, it's a fairly light combination overall. It's like my shoulder burn here, you know what I mean? I'm definitely gonna be able to walk longer before my shoulder gives out with this setup. Now, just to be clear, I'm not using a variable ND filter, which I normally would be. So I'm just recording straight out of the lens so you can see what this lens does with the flaring and stuff. I notice a lot of times when I use the ND filter, you get like weird flaring and, you know, not caused by the lens, but it's caused by the filter. So I just wanted to show you that. So my shutter speed is definitely way faster than it should be right now. I'm recording at 4K 24. And I'm just using the regular profile. So as you can see behind me, the background blur is looking pretty darn good. Now, it's not f1.8 like butter, but still, it's pretty darn good. And it's definitely not the Buttermaker butter f1.2 75mm. That lens is incredible. But anyways, like, this is a good separation. The woods is behind me, maybe like 20-30 feet or so it's not that far. The farther the background, the blurrier it'll be. So another really cool feature of this lens is the minimum focus distance. It's 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters approximately. So as you can see here, you can get pretty darn close to subjects and get that really good background separation or 3D pop, depending on, you know, how you want to look at it. So that is very impressive. You can see there, I'm just a little too close. I was kind of surprised by the minimum focus distance offered on this lens just because of how small the lens is. So in order to focus close to something, the focus element in the lens has to be able to move. And for example, the 28mm lens Viltrox I just reviewed, and which I'm using in the studio, you saw just a second ago, that minimum focus distance is like more than double this lens here, and that's 28mm. So the slower f2.8 aperture probably made it a lot easier for the Viltrox engineers to get that minimum focus distance on this lens. So again, for $158, I would expect this lens to have some pretty bad lens flaws, you know, distortion, fringing, sharpness might not be so good, especially in the corners. So let's go in the lab real quick and test some of that stuff out and just put that stuff to the side once we get through it, and then we'll go over some real world sample photo. And I think this sample video is pretty good for you guys that are looking to do some vlogging. This lens definitely does a really good job in my opinion, especially for the money, and it's such a good option because of the lightweight aspect of it. So, all right, I'll catch up with you in the studio in a minute. Let's go. They did send me this lens, by the way. So I'm actually recording with my 28mm f1.8 Viltrox right now on my A7 IV. But what I got here is the new 20mm f2.8 full frame autofocus lens from Viltrox. Now this lens somehow goes for $158 US, which is unbelievable as far as I'm concerned. That's crazy cheap for an autofocus lens that has full frame coverage. So very impressive on Viltrox's part. Now, build quality wise, you could see this is definitely like mostly plastic, but overall not bad, you know, like good enough. So we got here a 52mm filter thread, and then we just have a focus ring here that does not feel that good. It's not as buttery as you would expect, you know what I mean? It's like it's got some friction to it. It does feel cheaper, no doubt about it, the focus ring. So it is what it is. That's what you get for $158. Looking at it from the back here, we do have the USB-C firmware update port, which is awesome. And, you know, metal lens bayonet, which is nice. No rubber gasket, so there is no rubber gasket there. Weather sealing's not going to be the greatest on this lens. So this is what it looks like mounted up to the Sony a7C II, and you can see just how small this is. So this full frame wide angle lens weighs in at only 5.5 ounces or 157 grams. So it's incredibly lightweight. And what's cool about that is it's going to be great for doing gimbal type stuff where you're walking and talking to the camera. So I would like a faster max aperture. f2.8 is pretty fast, but f1.8 would be better. f1.4 would be better than that even. But again, guys, what comes with that faster aperture is size, weight, and cost. So it looks like Viltrox tried to make the most affordable full-frame wide-angle lens option available for the Sony E-mount camera system, and right now it is definitely this lens. I mean, $158 is crazy. I honestly can't believe it's that cheap. It feels like it should be at least $300 or something. Like, all right, guys, so 20 millimeters, like, what's that good for? Well, 20 millimeters is very wide, so it's great for landscape photography, interior photography. You know, you could do real estate stuff with it, things like that. In addition to that, though, is vlogging. So if you're walking and talking with the camera in front of you, 20 millimeters is nice and wide on a full frame camera, so you'll get like a good enough background and your face won't like fill the whole screen. You know, it makes it look like you're further from the camera when you use a wider angle lens like this. All right, guys, we're back in the studio here, and I just wanted to show you what the 20 millimeter looks like in my studio here, and this is the view you can get. Now the lens is right here. I'm touching the front of the lens, so that's how far it is from me, just to be clear. Now, I just wanted to test the flaring quick. So let's see how that works. And you can see here with the flashlight test, it's there. You definitely see the flaring. But when I was walking a minute ago doing the vlogging, the sun was behind me, and that was a more real-world test. And overall, I would say it did a really good job managing the flare as far as keeping me like looking pretty contrasty. It didn't wash out like as bad as I have seen in the past. Now, I've seen better flaring performance over the years, but considering the cost of this lens, it's really good, I would say, overall. Now, I just want to test the autofocus a little bit when I hold up something so you can see how the autofocus works. So let me just shut off facial recognition. All right, I just turned that off. So now when I hold this up, it should switch to the subject. And it's switching back to me. Now it's smoothly switching to the flashlight, but when I move it away, it's very quickly going back to my face. And this is with the autofocus transition speed set to 4 and subject shift sensitivity also set to 4. So overall, I would say it performs pretty good. Let me just slow down the autofocus transition speed and see how that works. All right, so I just slowed the transition speed down, and I also lowered the subject shift sensitivity 1 as well. So that's on 3. The transition speed is also on 3. So let's see how it looks now. You can see it definitely slowed down quite a bit. Let's see what it does now. That's actually much better. All right, so I guess the subject shift sensitivity was a little bit too high maybe. And when I moved the flashlight away, it more aggressively switched to my face, I'm guessing. So yeah, when you just slow it down a little bit to number 3, this is working really good now. Again, I'm very impressed, very impressed. All right, guys, so just some quick lab testing here. Let's just go through here. So on the top left, you will see the EXIF data. So you can see the aperture is at f2.8, ISO 100, and I was shooting raw quality. So let's take a look at these photos when we zoom in here at f2.8. So what I am seeing is some softness for sure. This is not near as sharp as the 28mm f1.8 lens I just tested. So this is making a little bit more sense now that we factor in that cost, because this is definitely soft in the corners here, and even in the center area, it's definitely softer than I would like to see. Not too bad in the center area, but definitely on the edges, it's pretty soft. Yeah, so f4 is looking pretty good. And then f5.6 definitely crisps up a little bit more. So yeah, we are getting a little bit of softness with this lens. So it's not as sharp as some of the other lenses. Now you can see here at f8, it does look great. Sharpness is looking very good now, corner to corner at f8. But at f2.8, not so much. You could see the softness in the text, you know, the pipe cleaners, and so forth. So, you know, again, guys, I'm not surprised to see this, and this is still pretty darn good when you factor in the cost. I'm still not disappointed at this. Of course, I would want it to be sharper, but at this price point, this is still very impressive sharpness overall, I would say. So now at the minimum focus distance here, looking at the quarter, let's zoom in, and wow, there's like no fringing. I don't see any pink or purple fringing or green fringing. So this is actually really well controlled and better than I expected. Very surprised by the fact that there's no fringing here, because the 28mm I just reviewed did have fringing in this test at f1.8. Now, looking at the bokeh balls, you can see because of the 7-blade aperture, they do have that like octagoning effect. You could even see it here on the larger light source. So that is a downside with the aperture blade. So a 9-blade aperture, for example, this would look more round. Now in the real world, you'll see it doesn't matter as much, but when it comes to shooting lights and stuff like that, it will matter a little bit, as you can see that octagoning effect on the lights, just to be clear. So when we stop down here to f4, looking really good. You can see the sharpness of the quarter is tacking up a little bit. f5.6. It's a little bit sharper even still. And here's f8, f11, and f16. All right, so I just wanted to go over the distortion really quick. And because this is a raw file and a new lens, Lightroom does not have the built-in profile for me to just click on and off. However, if I hit the R key here, I can just show you with the grid lines how much distortion there is. And it's kind of a weird distortion phenomenon with this lens. It kind of has like a ripple effect almost in the corners, and you can see that on the mortar of the bricks. And obviously in the real world that is straight, but overall fairly well controlled, I would say. Another thing you can see from this is the vignetting here. At f2.8 you can see the corners are darkening a little bit, and then down here at f4 you can see how they brighten up that little bit. See that corner darkening and brightening effect there. All right, guys, so looking at some real-world photos here, this is at f2.8 at pretty much the minimum focus distance here. I just wanted to show you what this looks like with a landscape scene in the background. Now, this is a raw file that I edited in Lightroom, so let me just show you. This is straight off the camera raw, and this is with my edit. And it really wasn't much. I just dragged the shadows up a little bit, dragged the highlights down, and added some vibrance for a little bit of color. Now here is another image. This is an HDR composite, so this is 3 separate photos combined to get this surreal HDR, which looks awesome in my opinion. And when you zoom in here, everything is looking great. So this was shot at f8, which does happen to be like the maximum sharpness for this lens, it seems like. So f8 is kind of like the sweet spot for this lens, and that's what I was using for this shot. Now here's a very similar shot. It's just a vertical version, except this is just a raw file that I edited, so it's not an HDR composite. So this is what the raw file looked like straight off the camera. Pretty flat, lacking some contrast, but that's expected because the sky is so bright, and I split the scene 50-50, so it is going to be underexposed on the bottom a little bit. So just with a quick edit here, you can see how I was able to bring out the detail and, you know, just punch it up a little bit. Now, I stopped at Lowe's parking lot really quick because the sky was actually really cool, and I just wanted to show you, here's another HDR composite. I was actually shooting out of the car window, and that's what that looks like. And here is just a raw file for comparison. So this is a single frame, and this is the HDR frame, just to show you the difference in drama and that surreal, you know. Now here's another raw file. I was just shooting at the mirror here. Kind of seemed like something fun to do as I was sitting there. Now here's one of the Goshen Public Library from a distance. Again, this is an HDR, so it does look a little bit surreal here. And but you know, I like the way it looks. And here's just another closer shot of the library. Now here is just a raw file of this. I don't even know what this building is, to be honest with you, but it's a really cool old historic building in Goshen, New York. And this is just a raw file. And here is the HDR to show you the difference between the two. Nice wide angle perspective on this shot. Like the way this looks, just walked forward towards the structure a little bit here, and it's just another frame. And here's a close-up with some background blur looking at the gate itself. Now here's one of my son Jace. We went to take some pictures at Fallsburg Falls. And here's a couple of snapshots. This is an HDR. This is just a single raw file, so you can see just what it looks like, wide angle view. Now here's another one. This is just a raw file that I enhanced a little bit. And here is an HDR file. So this is a composite so you can see, you know, more surreal look on this particular scene. This is actually a panoramic. I took 2 images, one for the up here on the top and one for the bottom, and then I combined them both. So it's actually a panorama composite and an HDR composite. That's why the crop looks like a square. So here's just a vertical HDR. Didn't really do much to this one. And here's just 2 more of Jace. And I really like the way that this lens renders in the real world. And the sharpness is definitely acceptable. So even though it was a little bit softer in the lab testing compared to some more expensive lenses, guys, in the real world here you can see it looks pretty darn good. I mean, this is great. It's got some nice 3D pop with the depth of field play. Now here's just one again. I just moved a little bit here to show you the more wide angle view with his hands and fingers there. Now here I just did a couple of shots with a higher shutter speed. So this is at f2.8. I just wanted to freeze like the frothing water. I actually should have had the shutter speed even faster than this, but this particular shot looks good. And it did for the most part freeze the water. Here's just another one. The water was like surging towards me. It was pretty cool looking. Here's just one looking down at the water. Here's just another shot I wanted to show you at f2.8 so you could see the foreground out of focus area. I actually focused back here somewhere. Now here's one I just wanted to show you. I focused on this like dead log tree here so you could see that background rendering. And now here is the frame, and you can see that log right here on the bottom. This is that same log. I just lifted the camera up a little bit and took an HDR of the landscape here. So overall, very impressive. All right, guys, so at the end of the day, this is a really good option, I would say, especially for the weight, size, and cost. And if you got something out of this video, thumbs up, super appreciate that, and it would be super cool if you subscribe as well. All right, I will catch up with you guys next time. Take care.